We're delighted to have Jim O'Callaghan, a TD with Fianna Fáil, here today to speak with me about my mental health in Irish schools transition year project. The approach to mental health in the Irish school system in Ireland must be improved. Student and parent voices are missing from this vital discussion, and therefore, I'm creating this video podcast series and interview students, parents, past pupils, and those who wish to advocate alongside our voices in order to strive for change. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and why you wanted to get involved in the Mental Health in Irish Schools Transition Year Project 2020 to 2021.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks, Aisling, for inviting me on and for interviewing me. And I hope I'll be able to give you some information that you'll find useful. In terms of my background, I'll keep it relatively short. I went to national school out in Cornelscourt, went to secondary school then in Ranelagh. And I suppose school is an extremely important formative time of people's lives. And I suppose the issue that's of real concern to me is not just the ordinary development of children throughout their school years, but that the last year has been unbelievably hard on school children. Like you yourself in the past 12 months have missed, I'd say, at least 5 months of school where you haven't been there. And like anyone who's been through the process of school will know it's enormously important, not just in terms of your educational development, but also in terms of your whole socialization, meeting friends, your ability to mature and develop. Like there's so much more to school than education in terms of just your pastimes and your sports. So listen, that's, I suppose, part of the reason why I was so anxious to speak to you this year, because this year it's a real challenge for school students such as yourself to ensure that they protect their mental health, because like we can't deny it, everyone has been affected, everyone in school has been affected by having their school interrupted, their pastimes interrupted, their sports interrupted. Like I don't know, Aisling, do you have hobbies in terms of playing an instrument or anything like that? But you're just not able to do it anymore. And obviously there's a pandemic and we have to be very conscious of public health advice. But I think it's very important that we acknowledge the harm and I suppose the interference in children's lives at this crucial developmental stage. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to be involved in it and why I'm so happy to speak to you this afternoon.
How do you feel the approach surrounding mental health has changed since you were in school?
Well, the whole issue of mental health has changed dramatically. In my assessment, in Ireland, since I was in school in the 1980s, it's changed such a huge amount since then. And just if we could leave aside school children for the moment, like previously mental health issues in Ireland, like in many other countries, like people who suffered from severe mental health issues were traditionally in Ireland institutionalized. And that was the case in other countries as well. And also a form of of course, not every mental health issue is as serious as other mental health issues. And just in the same way as anyone who gets a physical ailment, it's not the same as, the most severe ones. But there was a tendency in Ireland in the past to assess all mental health issues as being the same, and that there was, in a way, something wrong with the person who was suffering from what was just clearly another form of illness. So I think Irish attitudes to mental health have changed significantly. In the past 20, 30 years, people are much more accepting of it. They're much more aware that it is an ordinary part of your development, that in the same way as you'll get a physical health knock, you can get a mental health knock as well. And unfortunately, I think in Ireland for too long, it was perceived that if a young person, and generally mental health issues do manifest themselves early, but that if a young person got a mental health setback early in their life, that defined them for the rest of their lives. But like, as we know, like any other illness, it shouldn't do so. In terms of mental health issues in schools, like when I was in school, the idea that people would talk about, oh, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling down, the people didn't do that. And that wasn't just, I think, amongst my friends, just didn't really happen. Though obviously people were feeling depressed and down. Like, when you're a young person growing up, socialization is a huge issue. Sometimes you're concerned when you're 14 or 15 that your social life isn't developing the way it wanted to develop, or you see other friends who appear to have this greater social life than you have, which is never really the case. But these are pressures that are on people in schools. Well, I think now it's become much more receptive for people to talk openly if they're not feeling well. And, we don't all have to feel well all the time. And I think that's a particular benefit at times like this, where there are such obvious reasons as to why young people will not be feeling happy, will be feeling down. And I think it's very important that they talk about them. I think it's also important that, we naturalize it more, because if you deprive somebody of their school, if you deprive somebody of their friends, if you deprive somebody of their pastimes or their sports, of course it's going to have an impact on them. And so we need to be able to talk about that. So I think it has improved a lot since I was in school, Aisling.
Yeah. How do you feel we can further this conversation and make more changes in Irish schools?
Well, I suppose there's the immediate issue, which is the restrictions on what they've done to young people. But I suppose the thing I'd like to see most of all improve is that people such as yourself and others would be able to speak openly about how they feel. And sometimes, like in Ireland in the past, traditionally, people probably did speak about themselves, young people, what they wanted. But I suppose sometimes now, in a way, it's like a 21st century form of guilt. Some young people think, they shouldn't be expressing what their anxieties are, or what their concerns are, or what their needs are. And I think you're entitled to express that. You don't all the time have to be thinking about other causes that don't relate to yourself. Obviously, young people, I know this, they're hugely politically motivated and other political issues affect them. But like maybe this generation should take a leaf out of the 1960s generation, who just seem to be primarily interested in themselves. I know your generation aren't, but I think it is important that young people speak out about the issues that are affecting them, because if you don't speak out about it, people will assume, actually, they're fine, they're not talking about it, everything's okay, because there's an assumption amongst older people like me that if they're not speaking out, they must be fine.
Yeah. How do you mind your own mental health and well-being, especially now in the time of a pandemic?
Well, this is a hard time, and I'm around a long time, and I regard myself as fairly resilient. My mother's around 92 years. She's fairly resilient. She says this is the toughest time she's lived through. Okay, and she's lived through the Second World War, what we call the emergency in Ireland. She's lived through the history of the Irish, to the most part of the independent Irish state. She says this is the toughest time she's lived through. And the thing she finds when she looks at what she worries most of all about is how it's affecting people like you, your age. But I think it's an indication that if somebody who's 92 years of age thinks this is the toughest time they've lived through in their life, this is a very serious time, and it is going to impact everyone. And I suppose from your point of view and young people's point of view, it is a big challenge and a big burden to place on your shoulders at such a young age. But I think the important thing I want to communicate is we'll get through this. These things happen before. Pandemics have happened before. They will end. We'll move on. And, your life will get back to the normality that you expect and you deserve. How do I mind my mental health? I run. I've always played sports since I was young. So I suppose I empathize with young people now who've been told you can't play your sport. But I've always kept physically fit, although for a period, I used to play rugby to quite a high level. After I stopped it, then I just sort of, didn't exercise for quite a while and didn't suit me. So I run about 3 or 4 times a week. I read a lot. I try to avoid watching news and listening to the radio all the time going on about COVID. I think we need to move ourselves beyond this. I try to avoid listening to numbers coming out in the evening time. So I think the only thing we can control in this pandemic, I suppose, it's hard to control it. And in fairness to government, in fairness to the medical advisors, it's very difficult to control it. But the only thing we can control is our response to it. And that's why I think it's important that, each individual person just tries to recognize, that they're going to respond to it and deal with it. It's difficult. We get through it. There's going to be an end in sight. The good news is the vaccination is coming in. It's been rolled out in Ireland. I think we've had 250,000 doses administered to date. We'll do much more in the coming months. And as vaccinations go up, restrictions will come down and we'll get through it. So, yeah, I do. I read as well and exercise and talk to my family, keep in touch with people. Like, it's really important to keep in touch with people. I know it's odd, Zoom and technology, but I suppose they help in some respects. But also, it's easy for me to say it, but we've all become too much a prisoner of technology. Like part of the reason, I think, like, if we didn't have technology, I think our response to this might be not as amenable as it has been to date. But I suppose a lot of us are sedate now with technology, and technology has its advantages, but I think we have to learn for the future as well. Like, the way we want to live our lives, the way most people want to live their lives, is outside, away from technology, with people, with human interaction. And I suppose the most important lesson we've learned from this is the value of human interaction. Yeah.
Very true.
As part of the Mental Health in Irish Schools Transition Year Project 2020 to 2021, I have started a petition to highlight the lack of mental health support in schools and to ask the Irish government to provide a dedicated mental health support service for Irish schools. The petition draws on the Irish Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy commissioned National Crisis Survey in March of 2019, in which 9 in 10 adults strongly wished for therapeutic counselling to be made in all schools in Ireland. Why did you sign the petition?
Well, I think, as you've identified, mental health is a very important issue for all of us in society. It's particularly important for school kids. We don't define ourselves by it, but at some stages in your life, you do get a knock. And the important thing is that you can get through it. Like, I suppose, being my age as well, I've seen people who I've grown up with who got a mental health knock. And it generally was around 19 years of age, some of them get it. And I can look back at it now and I can identify a couple of people who got a knock. Some of them got through it and some of them didn't get through it, and with very negative consequences. So I can see that it is important that we have supports in place from an early stage, because a lot of this can be dealt with. And if the supports are there, we can get people through that difficult period and on to the rest of their lives. And like, it is a transformative era. Like, you're Aisling, you're in a transition year. Like, going through that period from sort of 18 or 17 to 21, 22, they're important years in people's lives, and they're really formative years. And if you can get yourself on a stable mental health basis through those years, you're going to get through, in my opinion, the rest of your life. But some people get shocks at that stage. There are disappointments. There's uncertainties. You're still developing mentally, and certainly to a certain extent physically. So they're the ages when there's transition, and we've got to be careful and protect people. And if there is a knock, let's get them through this with the supports that you're advocating in your petition.
What is the message you'd like to share with the people watching this interview? Well,
I'd like them to know that there's hope there. Because a lot of people, I was watching the BBC News, it was a good while ago now. I tried to avoid watching news, but I was watching it, and a girl your age was being interviewed. And she was very fearful. She was fearful of getting the COVID and being damaged by it, which wasn't really going to happen statistically when you look at the evidence available in respect of it. But I just want young people to be aware that there is hope and that there is a future and that we'll get through this period. You are unlucky in one level that you're going through the crucial developmental stage of your lives at the time that there is a pandemic ongoing. For me and for other people who are my age, like, when we don't experience events, like, things are paused or postponed in my life. Don't go to see matches, I'll go and see them again. But for people your age, crucial developmental issues, they're not paused or postponed, or regret to say they're lost. You don't get those opportunities again. But it's important to say there's hope there. The vaccine has been rolled out. Pandemics end. We'll get through it. You'll all be able to look back on this and say, God, that was a terrible time in our lives. We probably won't remember it a huge amount, but we'll get through it. And in a way, I believe you will be much stronger in the future and capable with dealing with other knocks that inevitably will happen in everyone's life as they progress.
Jim O'Callaghan, TD, thank you for showing your support towards my mental health in Irish schools transition year project. Your time, words and support to the mental health of young people in Ireland is valued and appreciated.
And thank you, Aisling, for the project that you set up and for the decision you made to ask me to be interviewed.
Thank you.